Alright everyone, we'll get started. A few people sneaking in. G'day everyone, my name is Danny, I'm part of the team at Fuller's. We're really excited tonight to be able to be part of supporting this beautiful book by Daniel C. Really timely book that will help us through our lives, through the era that we're living in. I'd like Daniel's business partner Tim to come up and introduce us to Daniel and ease us into the evening. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Danny. Well, folks, thanks for coming. This is an exciting day. It's been a long time coming, as some of you will know. So, welcome to the launch of Spacemaker: How to Unplug, Unwind, and Think Clearly in the Digital Age. I'm just going to do some housekeeping, and then I'll introduce this guy. So, first of all, what we're going to do is have Daniel's going to talk about the book for probably about half an hour or so. And then we'll do some roaming mic Q&A for some of your burning questions. And then there'll be some time for some mingling and chatting and book signing, no doubt, selfies with the author himself. And we'll be well and truly wrapped up by 6:30 for this session. Just one thing of noting, we've got a couple of cameras recording and set up. This one's only going to be recording Daniel. The one at the back will be recording the back of your head, unless you turn around. But if you would like to make sure you're not on camera, come and see me and we'll make sure you don't make it in any of the footage. And Lou's are just straight behind us out the door and then to the right. So who is this guy? Who's Daniel? He's a husband to Kylie. He's got 3 kids. In the front row, by looking at here. He's been my business partner in our company called Spacemakers for the last decade. He's a minister in Together Church, local Hobart church, and he's also the leader of Together Network, which was his harebrained idea in the midst of COVID last year to create hope groups in and amongst the world of COVID last year. So he's got a few hats. Originally, he's a physio. Trained as a physio. Worked in Australia and UK for 10 or 15 years before going on some different career paths, including with me. But what I'd really like to do is take you back to circa 2011. And if you're anything like me, you probably can't remember anything pre-COVID-19 anyway. So I'm going to help jog your memories about what was happening in 2011. In January, we had those big Brisbane floods, if you remember. In Feb, we had those awful Christchurch earthquakes. In March, we had that frightening earthquake and tsunami in Japan. In April, William and Kate got married. And in May, US found Bin Laden and killed him. But really, in June, this is the big one. In June, I got together with Dan and we started a business. So I think you'll agree that on a global scale, they're all kind of on par when I shared it. But let me dwell on that moment back in 2011 when we first got together. So both of us got excited about maybe what we could do to make a difference in people's lives. And what that was centred around is making space to help people do the things that mattered most, whether it was in work or life. And we came up with this name called Spacemakers. And one of the first things we thought about, and probably our most successful initially, was a course about how to tame people's email inboxes. And we called that Email Ninjas. Online and face-to-face training course. But what I wanted to share with you is some snippets about what Daniel was already thinking about in 2011. So I've been through the archives of our files, and this is what I found. Because as any of you who know Daniel know that he's a big thinker. He asks big questions. He's not a small talk guy. It's not like, how do you reckon the cats are going? How do you reckon they're travelling this year? Because my response would always be, well, they're winning, mate. Okay, they're winning, and they're better than the Crows. But we just don't get into those discussions. So the big questions in 2011 centred around personal reflections on why I'm energised by this small business idea and how it relates to my personal mission statement. That's a big question. You've got to be pretty confident that you know what you're doing. This is Daniel's answer. I'm not really sure how this fits with my personal mission statement. But he elaborates. But I suspect that this is one of those things that I'll enter without quite knowing why, and will lead to other interesting places that were unexpected and core to my personal mission statement in ministry. I see that it will solve a problem and fulfil a need that is broad across many organisations and workplaces. People find the world a more and more demanding and complex place, and our practices, ideas, experience may bring peace of mind and clarity to others. So the thing is, before we put a training slide together, or a PowerPoint, or a cue card, he already had an inkling that we're on the cusp of something that might be quite meaningful and special. And we fast forward to 2014, where we had an idea that some of our best work was perhaps could be the subject of a small little ebook. You know, maybe 15, 20 pages. We could put it on the website. It'd be quite nice to share some of our best stuff. And it could even be a bit like a marketing tool. But I tell you what, by the end of the year, it turned into quite an expanded scope of a project. It kind of exponentially grew in terms of the content and the chapters of what could go in there. And it turned from an ebook into a real book. And one of the benefits I saw over this journey since 2014 is that not only was he writing, but he was road testing. And he was updating his research and he was updating his thinking. And he was writing on the fly, based out of experience, testing some of those ideas. But it's been like watching someone run a marathon, writing this book, and watching him do that. And at times he came close to pulling up stumps entirely, because it was the first marathon he's ever run. Because the pain was really great and really real at different points. But the most exciting thing is, you hit the finish line. And I couldn't be prouder of what you've achieved. See, got me. But look, the greatest gift you could give right now is obviously buying a book, but also leaving a review online, because that's, you know, we would love to be able to continue to share some of these ideas and reach as many people as possible. But for now, let's hear from the man himself on Spacemakers.
Thank you. I knew we should have deleted those archives. I will be doing it next time, I'm sure. Look, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I mean, there are so many people here that, you know, I've spent life with in so many different facets. People I haven't yet met, but it's really an honour to have you spend some time, and even spend time reading my words. So I'm really grateful. But I want to share a bit about my book, and I'm going to start with another book. So. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. So begins one of the great novels of the 19th century, A Tale of Two Cities by the late Charles Dickens. And written in 1859, these words are as relevant now as they were back then. See, the digital age is upon us, and it's incredible. It really is. It's the best of times, because we can access the world's information at the swipe of a screen. We can engage in new forms of communication and learning. We can talk to people in real time anywhere in the world, and it's simply amazing. So media theorist Tom Chatfield writes this: "We live in an age of miracles." I really like that. We live in an age of miracles so commonplace that it can be difficult to see this as anything other than part of the daily texture of living. And I really do think we live in an age of digital miracles, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, things that were science fiction just 5 years ago, a decade ago, are actually coming into reality today. And, you know, I love living in an age of miracles. You know, I get to work from home most of the time and coach and consult with people all over the world wearing my Ugg boots. How good's that? You know, I get to download images and upload photos like this for free and do presentations. You know, on the home front, I love that my kids can connect with family in Manchester and Hong Kong and Adelaide using WhatsApp or just free technology. I love that I can sleep in on the weekends because they're screaming Netflix while I'm sleeping in. I mean, it really is the best of times, right? But at the same time, it is also the worst of times. And everything is faster, everything is more complex, everything is more competitive across work and across life. You probably agree, yeah? And there's so much to get our heads around, like automation, digital mobility, e-learning, social media, cyber safety. Like, it just goes on and on and on, and it's really challenging. And we feel this as leaders, we feel this as parents, we feel this as professionals. We find it hard to make space in the clutter of life, which is what Tim was talking about before, space to think deeply, to rest fully, to connect with loved ones, to do the things that we know matter to us in and amongst this complex world. So again, same author, same book, Tom Chatsfield, he writes, time away from digital media is no longer our default state. It is not something we cannot, it is something we cannot experience without explicitly aiming to do so. So basically what he's saying, and this is pre-COVID, I mean, we're in a post-COVID world now. Basically he's saying that our new normal is to be always online and always distracted and connected in some way. And if we are to experience life without feeling wired and tired or digitally connected or overloaded away from the screen, then we actually are going to have to be intentional in making space, intentional in making this happen. Do you follow? And so, look, if Dickens was here today, I doubt he would have written a book, certainly not as long as his book. In fact, he probably would have just done a meme or a text. And either way, though, he would have been right. It is the best of times. It is the worst of times, even in the digital age. It was fun putting those poos up, I must say. So look, this is our context. It's the context in which we live and work and thrive as people seeking to make space in an age of clutter. So this book is about the making and meaning of space. Space is really precious. If we lack space to think, if we struggle to rest and breathe and simply focus...
That was an example.
This is an example of space. But I am thirsty. It's not fun unless you can throw water over the floor, right? This is my example of space, and this is actually why I wrote the book. In fact, I did spill water once, and it was like, that's what I want to communicate. Basically, in my analogy, the cup is our capacity. It's our finite time. It's the amount of stuff that we can do each day, the energy we have, the time we have to do things. And if that's the case, the digital age is like water flowing out of a cup and probably a little bit further than I spilled it. You know, the digital age represents the emails that are hitting our inbox, the meetings we need to attend, the school soccer practices that we're going to and driving our kids around to, the Netflix episodes we want to watch, the audiobooks we haven't yet seen, the things we want to read. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just so much stuff and it just flows on and on and on. And what I reckon is that nowadays we all live in a glass that is overflowing environment. This is our new normal. It's normal to feel cluttered and busy and distracted. And as wonderful as the digital age is, somehow we need to contend with a glass overflowing culture. Yeah? I mean, I wrestle with this deeply. I wrote the book because I wrestle deeply with space. I mean, Tim talked about the different roles I have. I love getting stuff done, and I love the things that the tech world can bring me, but I'm exhausted a lot of the time, and I'm continually contending with being too busy and too stretched and needing more time. And look, it's interesting, you can increase the glass by just working longer and harder, but eventually what happens? You just fill it and the water flows out. Does anyone else feel like this, like they live in an overflowing environment? Yeah. And so the book is really about if we're going to live in a culture, in an age where there is more than we can possibly fill in our cup, then we're going to have to work out what goes in first and what flows out. You can never fit it all in anymore. And what I find is we're overfilling our cup with digital stuff and pushing out stuff that actually is really healthy for us. And it's not that digital tech is bad, but I think the book is about saying we want to be really intentional about what we value and what goes in, and then make sure the stuff that just doesn't matter flows out. And really that's the context of why I wrote this book. I am actually thirsty. Okay. So this book began with a question. Not the question Tim raised, the real question. It began with a question about digital technology and productivity and what is the connection between these two worlds. So when I was coaching leaders, I would find people who didn't use technology and they wrestled because they didn't have tech skills or tech habits or tech confidence, and as a result of that, they weren't very productive. I mean, we know that, right? We need to use our online technologies to be productive. And yet there was this increasing cohort of executives, CEOs, leaders, professionals who are really good at technology. They have every app, they have every tool, everything. They spend all their time online, and yet they were distracted and wired and tired and making decisions on the run that just weren't smart decisions. They were focusing on the wrong things and they were deeply unproductive. And I've just met more and more people in this space. And so I was trying to work out what is the relationship between tech and productivity. And that's really where the book started. Because our culture tells us that the relationship is like this. It's a linear relationship. Get more tech, buy more tech stuff, get more apps, and you will be more productive, you'll get more done. I mean, that's the message that we hear again and again. But it's not true, and I'm sure you probably agree. In a post-COVID world with Zoom fatigue, you know it's not true. And so then I started to ask the question, well, could it be this? You know, could it be that a bit of technology makes you more productive, but then you hit a plateau? You experience the law of diminishing returns, more technology, more phones, more apps, more time online, and you actually don't get better results, you just kind of peak. But that doesn't match my experience, and increasingly as I read the research into multitasking, it doesn't match that either. So then I stumbled upon a book by Malcolm Gladwell, a book called David and Goliath, and he says that the majority of our world is not one of these graphs, it's actually an inverted U-curve. And he says we get so confused about what is right and what is wrong, what works and what doesn't, because we forget we live in an inverted U-curve world. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, this is the real relationship between digital technology and productivity. And so what an inverted U-curve is that you start off on the left-hand side of the curve, and a little bit of tech makes you more productive. We absolutely know that. And then you get that kind of plateau. But then if you keep buying more apps, spend more time online, if you wake up every morning and grab your smartphone, and then the last thing you do at night is kiss your smartphone to bed, you know, if you trade off time for everything else, to spend more and more time online, to spend 12, 14 hours a day online. 12 hours is the average for the Americans, 9 to 12 is average for Australians. So if we spend that much time online, more than we eat, commute, sleep, then we start to lose something, and that is what I call digital overuse. You experience fatigue, you start to feel distracted, you feel like you're always doing stuff but it's not necessarily what you need to do, and you lose the ability to read and be still and simply have peace and quiet. You struggle to actually have relationships with people with eye contact. You know, all this stuff is happening, and it's an experience of overusing our tools. So it's not an anti-tech book, but it is an anti-overuse tech book. And I think there's a difference. Yeah? And so, this is what I reckon's happened. It was happening pre-COVID. I mean, as Tim said, I've been writing this book for 7 years, but it's definitely accelerating. I think all of our culture has shifted into the right-hand side of the inverted U-curve, and we're experiencing digital overuse en masse. Many of us are experiencing this. And therefore, we need to have two types of habits if we're going to be healthy, happy, and productive. We need the habits of making pace, which I call the pace-making habits, which are the ones which get you up the left-hand side by being more productive. You know, learn how to use email and calendars, use Trello, get Asana, get apps, integrate your tools together. You need that stuff to swing into the productive zone. But then to stay in the productive middle, you also need the habits of pace. Space. You need space. Only one letter, pace. You need the habits of space. You need to be able to disconnect, unplug, unwind, and think clearly in the digital age. And both need to be happening nowadays in order to truly be as healthy and as productive as we can be. And so I say that space and pace are the yin and yang of personal productivity, and the book really centres on this idea that we need to learn the habits of being a spacemaker, the habits of unplugging in order to get more done. And that's really what the book is. Okay, so let me give you the framework, and then I just want to give you something really practical to finish. This is how the book is structured. There's the paradigm, there's the principles, and then there's the practices. And the paradigm is about reframing our relationship with the online world. It's about changing our mindset and changing our thinking, the way in which we understand our relationship with the online world. Okay. See, on the one hand, unplugging from your phone is pretty simple. You just turn it off on a weekend and you don't check it too much. It's not complex, right? But on the other hand, it's almost impossible for us to do. And it's not a habit problem, it's not a knowledge problem, it's a paradigm issue. So I was in Sydney 2 weeks ago chatting about the book. And I was talking about tech, and there was this lovely lady, but she started to tear up, and we started to have a conversation. She was pretty brave, and she was really vulnerable in a group of people. And she said this, she said, "I find tech really hard. I'll be at home with my children, and I just want to give them quality time and attention. But all I can think about is how many hearts I'm getting on Instagram on my latest post. And I just want to check my phone." And it really upset her. And look, I'm not addicted to social media, I'm addicted to heaps of other stuff. and I really connect with that gravitational pull to want to just grab my phone, and for me it's news and emails and productivity apps, but we all have our jam, do you know what I mean? And so in some ways something has to shift here and something has to shift here if we're going to turn off our phone even for a few hours once a week. We need a paradigm shift. Okay? And Cal Newport describes this same thing in Digital Minimalism. He says, "Minor corrections, willpower, tips and vague resolutions are not sufficient by themselves to tame the ability of new technologies to invade your cognitive landscape." He's a bit more wordy than me. "The addictiveness of their design and the strength of the cultural pressures supporting them are too strong for an ad hoc approach to succeed." So basically what he's saying is that tips and tricks aren't enough to help you overcome the gravity of the digital world. We need a philosophy of technology that is rooted in our core values and that motivates us towards genuine, sustainable, long-term habit change in the digital age. And so that is why I spent half the book almost on the paradigm of technology, on helping us to reinvent and rethink our mindset so that we can move towards the habits of unplugging. We need a new paradigm. Yeah? And so I do a really broad sweep of a whole lot of different disciplines. We look at the theory of technology, and there's some beautiful, helpful stuff there. We look at the role of neuroplasticity, bringing in my physiotherapy past background, the impact of digital power on unplugging. We look at the cultural stories of freedom and choice that shape our worldview, looking at a sociological perspective, and we look at how love motivates us in unseen ways, looking at it philosophically and theologically. And the whole point of this was to help us to really grasp how our relationship hinges on our connection with our devices. So, once we've done the paradigm, we looked at the principles. And the principles are the middle section of the book, which I think are really important as well. So in the subtle art of not giving a hoot, some kids in the room, by Mark Manson, he suggests that everyone has values, but not all values are helpful, not all values align with reality, and in typical Mark Manson style, he calls these shitty values. All right, so I didn't use that language, but basically in my book I talk about 5, we need true north values that align with reality and basically that are non-shitty, all right? And we particularly need non-shitty values that help us to disconnect from the screen and actually embrace other aspects of life that are life-giving and nourishing. And so I created an acrostic to help us remember the SPACE framework, SPACE, so to set limits, to plan patterns, to assign rest before work, to cultivate in-person community, and to embrace silence. And I talk about each of these I suppose, research-informed, non-shitty values or principles that can help us make space. So that's the second section of the book. Okay, the last section are 7 chapters on actually how to do it. How do you unplug and unwind in a very practical way? I'm a productivity guy. I care about the why, but I really care about the how. You know, unless you have clear and practical guidance, it's no point seeing the problem. Does that make sense? And so I've tried to be as specific as I can using my experience and the experience of people I've spent lots of time with to help us actually live differently and embrace the habits of space making. So hopefully, even if you don't read the book, hopefully you'll get something out of this talk. I'm going to go through 3 of these practices super quickly, but you'll get a bit of a sense of, you know, the types of practices that I'm talking about. Annual practices, weekly and daily. So the first practice, I like this one. It's super simple. Start with holidays. It's an annual practice. It sets the context. So according to Australian work-life research, 40% of people who work more than 45 hours a week, they say that they're too busy to take a holiday, and the reason they give is they're too busy to stop. I've spent time with senior leaders, lots and lots of leaders, and I've seen this pattern again and again and again. I saw it in my life, but we have shifted it, which has been great. Basically, the busiest people, the ones who most need space, are the ones who never have time to book their annual leave. And many of us feel so overwhelmed. You know, the glass is, you're just living in this like overflowing glass environment, just trying to get your inbox under control, and the idea of actually booking 4 weeks leave a year just feels overwhelming, even though you know it's good for you, right? So what I've found is, if you just push on and on, you don't want to, you end up making mistakes, you burn relationships and you burn your body out eventually. So what we found is, instead of having work first and rest second, why don't you just flip and reverse the order and start with rest, start with holidays, and then allow everything to flow from that. It's a super simple idea. And so the idea is basically pre-book your holidays before you book your work. At the start of every year, we do it in January, you can do it at any time I suppose, make sure you prioritise and plan your holidays first. So for us, we lock in our annual leave before any meeting, any conference, any scheduled appointment hits our calendar. Like, our rest comes first and everything else flows around it. We put it in the glass before the other stuff tries to get in, and it's really valuable. My wife have done it, and I have done it for years, and it makes us healthier and happier. It gives us something to look forward to. You know, when you're just drowning in work and it's like, oh, only 2 more months. I have 8 weeks off on a sabbatical in 2 months. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. But you get to look forward to it, and you also get to time your holidays, if you're clever, during the periods of life where you historically have pressure and stress, which is what we try to do. So this is our family pattern at the moment. We have about 2 weeks off in January and December, like many people, and it's fun. We do adventurous stuff. Because I lead a church community, Easter's busy, so I find by April I'm pretty tired. So I actually have a week off with my family, and we just play board games and we relax. We don't do much, but it's just very quiet and peaceful. And then again, I get sad, I get the seasonal affective disorder, I get grumpy basically, because of the dark, cold winter. And so in August I need a holiday, and we need a holiday, so we put that ahead of schedule. And my wife and I usually have a few days by ourselves without the kids somewhere in the middle. It's not rocket science. I almost didn't put it in the book because it's so simple, but since writing it, I've had so many people say that was a game changer for me, so I figured it's worth talking about. So just pause for a minute. Is there anything that stands out to you? Just reflect in silence. It's your introvert moment. Is there anything you'd like to do from this practice? And then I'll fly through the last 2. Okay, so we've done an annual practice. Here's a weekly practice. The weekly day of rest. Now, the weekly day of rest, it is the most difficult of all the habits. I'll be straight up front about that. But it is the most life-giving, and it's the one that just has been a game changer for me and my family, and I can't advocate it enough. So in the digital age, many of us are forgetting what it means to rest deeply. You know how Cam Newport talks about deep work? Well, I actually think we need to work out how to rest. Rest cannot be assumed anymore. It's actually a skill that we can practice, that we can invest in, and that we can learn to habituate in our lives. In order to be still and silent, just to rest emotionally and physically, it's actually quite hard. And one of the reasons it's hard is because work and rest often look really similar. So for me, my work involves typing and swiping, scanning screens, looking at the internet, communicating using devices. And then what did I find myself doing on the weekend to rest? Typing and swiping, scanning screens, communicating. I use different apps, like Instagram versus, Outlook. But my brain can't tell the difference neurologically between what I'm doing. What I'm doing for work actually mimics too much of what I'm doing for rest. And therefore, if I want to experience deep rest, I need to rethink and recalibrate my digital habits, because I need to not work when I'm not working. And I need my brain to rest, not just my body. Do you follow? And so I think we need to recalibrate and ask the question, what is work for me? And it'll be different for everyone, but in the book I talk about how to actually define what work is. What is rest for me? Not just the absence of work, but what is truly restful. And therefore, how do I habituate that? And not only as an individual, but with others. I rest with my family. So how do I, as an introvert, rest with my extrovert wife? I'm active, others are passive. How do we do this? So I've mapped this out in the book. And I think it's really important. It allows us to ritualise our weekends and to experience deep rest. I think it's something we can spend time trying to learn these skills. So for me, there is a qualitative difference between resting with my phone on versus resting with my phone off. And so once a week for 24 hours, I actually do it from Friday night to Saturday night, but for 24 hours I put my phone away. I put my tools away, I disconnect from the online world as part of having a day off from work. Now, when I say this, why don't you turn your phone off for a day? The objection I usually get is this. What's that for? But seriously, they say, what's that for? A day without my phone? WTF? How could I get by without texts or checking the weather or knowing what the news is or getting my WhatsApp feeds? How could I do that? It's almost offensive, which is why you need a paradigm first, right? But I think we're looking at it the wrong way. See, you can look at it this way and think about what you're missing out on, or you can look at it this way. Because all through the rest of the week, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, I'm basically on call. I'm using my phone for work and life, and I'm constantly connected. I'm a slave to my device. And so one day a week I get a beautiful, full day of white space where I can put stuff in my glass that isn't digital and fill it with a whole lot of stuff that is actually life-giving outside of the screen. It allows me to rest deeply. Do you follow? So it's just about perspective. I love that we get to wake up and have no plans on a Saturday. And sometimes we wake up and the kids are burning food or we're cooking food, but we get to eat together. It's great. We do what we feel like. We play board games. Jethro and I play Agricola every Saturday. I go bike riding. I love to exercise. That's actually restful for me. Or getting out and doing stuff. Chainsawing is restful for me because it's not what I do for work. I probably shouldn't chainsaw at work. I love reading books. I love stopping and looking at small stuff which I just don't notice when I'm online. Or I stop and I think about the bigger questions in life. Yes, I miss out on something. Okay, I definitely miss out on something one day a week. However, I also gain something. Yeah? So there's my practice. And in the book I talk about how do you design a day of rest once a week based on two principles, rest and reflection. You need to plan a day. So what's your day that you'll habituate? You create a ritual. It's very hard to flip from work mode to rest mode without a ritual and a plan. So how do you prepare dinner and prepare the house, etc.? How do you disconnect practically? How do you define what are the do's, so what's restful, and what are the don'ts, what looks like work? And there's an appendix that shows how we do it. So hopefully that can be useful. But just pause for a moment and just think, look, what stands out? I know that that's challenging, but just again, is there anything that stands out to you? And then I'll share the final practice. Okay. Last practice, we're in the daily perspective and the daily pause. Now, this habit came about, well, I pulled a whole lot of ideas together in this part of the book. And it came about because I read a research study where, it's from the US, where they deliberately electrocuted people. They gave them electric shocks, only in the US. And people hated it so much that they were going to pay money not to be shocked again. And then the researchers put people in a room for 6 to 15 minutes without a phone, and they were told to just ruminate, just think their own thoughts, do nothing but think. But we don't encourage it, but you can electrocute yourself if you want. And 67% of men and 25% of women chose to self-administer painful electric shocks rather than sit in a room silently for 6 minutes. That was hilarious. So, I didn't know what to do with that. But the daily pause is basically saying we need to retrain our brain to enjoy stillness and silence and our own thoughts. I think because we're so distracted, when we stop, all this pain comes up here and here, but we need to sit and pause regularly. And so what I talk about in the book is how do you create small pockets of time in your day to habitually pause to, so you won't shock yourself. So there are lots of ideas in the book, but one of them is very, very simple, is just to eat together regularly, and to do so without devices. It's actually just a simple pause. Very simple, okay? Look, eating is life-giving and it's very research-based, and it's a way in which you can pause individually and together just to experience something beautiful away from a screen. So Charles Duhigg, Habits author, he says this, based on multiple research studies. He says, when families habitually eat together, they raise children with better homework skills, higher grades, greater emotional control, and more confidence. So basically, there was a study where they looked at 12-year-old girls, and when 12-year-old girls regularly ate with their families, they ended up being less likely to binge drink, smoke, regularly use marijuana, or become pregnant by the age of 17. In other studies, people who eat regularly around a table without a device have higher college entrance scores, less debt, more income, better mental health outcomes in adulthood. So it's not bad for a simple practice of eating together without a screen. Yeah? And so interestingly, the benefits are not correlated to what you eat. So you can go out and eat your organic broccoli, or you can just put like frozen pizza in the microwave, and that's just as good. The benefits of eating together is not the food, it's the banter. It's having conversation with people you care about and love on a regular basis. It increases numeracy and literary skills, a whole lot of stuff. Really simple. And so I love this habit because it's so uncomplicated. And it's fun. I mean, who doesn't want to eat with other people? Most of the time. And when you do it, one of the things I find helpful, particularly if you're not used to eating together without a TV on or devices at the table, it can be useful to ask and answer meaningful questions, just to kickstart meaningful, interesting conversation. I've got a few conversation starters in the book, but some of my favourites are, what are you thankful for today? We just asked that at the table, because gratitude and thankfulness is linked to mental health and happiness. We asked, what has been a wonderful challenge or failure today? And this comes from Malcolm Gladwell's desirable difficulty theory, where he basically says that we want to encourage failure, because if you don't fail at anything ever, well then you haven't tried anything risky. So I want to create a risk culture in our family where we celebrate failing. And Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist, you would have heard of growth and fixed mindset, she suggests that we ask, what did you try hard at today, knowing that effort is more important than outcomes. But look, my favourite is this one, and my friend Gabby gave me this one. He stole it from someone, but we really like this. What is your high-low buffalo? So what's your high point for the day? What's your low point for the day? And what's your buffalo? So what's strange or weird or funny? And our kids really like it. It's a very simple way to start conversation. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. So, if we're going to finish, I also like this. Media ecologist Susan Morshart, she put her kids on a 4-month fast, so if you disagree, I'm going to do that. A 4-month digital fast, and she ended up creating 10 digital commandments. Her first 2 were, thou shalt bring no media to thy dinner, but they kept breaking the rules, so she had to add a second, which was, thou shalt bring no dinner to thy media. So last pause, Pause again. Look, is there anything from what I've talked about that is worth taking away as an idea or an action? Just pause, commit to something in yourself, and then I just want to finish with one last slide. Alright, so look, at the end of the day, space making in my mind is not about rejecting the online world, it's not about rejecting the beauty or wonders of digital technology. But it is learning to be more productive by avoiding digital overuse. And to make space in the digital age, we need to shift our paradigm, our thinking, we need to reorientate our principles around non-shitty values, and we need to embed simple practices annually, weekly and daily, which is why I call them the space-making habits. And the beautiful thing about the nature of space, which I've tried to depict in this diagram, is you don't need a lot of it to make an enormous difference in your life. You only need a little bit of space to make a tremendous difference, which is why it's so valuable to actually create a bit of a rhythm in your life where you can unplug and unwind and think clearly in the digital age as a habit and as a practice. It helps your mental health, it helps your relational happiness, it actually makes you more, not less, productive. And so I'm passionate about making space, and I hope that you will be too. Yeah. So, we're going to have a roaming mic, and I won't pour any more water on the ground. I'd love to hear a few questions from you. I don't give it to Michael, he'll ask a hard question.
Well, you're lucky, Daniel, it's not a question at all. When you were busy spilling water all over the floor, I had a look at my glass, which has got a line halfway up. And if these guys up the back are being responsible, they're not allowed to put any more liquid in that glass than the line. And you know, it's a good analogy for what you've been talking about, I think.
It is. No, thank you. And we have a chapter called Set Limits, which is the idea that actually life-giving limits are really important. We need to reframe our thinking. So yeah, that's great. Excellent.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Daniel. You talked about the importance of annual leave, and obviously COVID blew big holes in people's plans for various reasons. What do you think were the sort of effects of that on people? And I guess looking at the positive, did it help some people find more goodness support closer to home?
Yeah, I mean, the impact of COVID on us that's a huge question. I mean, it has been hard, you know, in terms of people having to have staycations rather than, you know, heading out and having their full annual leave. I mean, I'm not sure. I think people have responded to COVID in such different ways. I know so many people who have had a major change in life because they've reflected on their values and their habits and the way in which they work, and they've decided to make a change during that time. There's others who are just exhausted because they've been parenting kids and wrestling with, you know, all the stress of mortgage pressures as a result. I mean, I spend a lot of time coaching people overseas, and it's far, far worse. So I don't know. I don't know if I can answer the question about how it's changed, but I do think the world is changing, and I do think that we are online more than we were even back then.
Quite simply, the difficult thing is transitioning from adult to child, and like the slide that showed it, 4 young people who are all enjoying and socialising by talking to their phone or texting. How do you pass this on to the next generation? Because that's
it's important. I write for adults because I'm too scared of writing for young people, firstly. But look, I actually have started to give digital parenting seminars. I gave one a few weeks ago, and I'm running one again in a few weeks in August, where I'm not speaking to young people. Again, they terrify me, but I'm speaking to the parents of young people. And look, I think that there are a lot of similarities. In the book, I talk about iGen. So there's a US sociological researcher called Jean Twenge, who is one of the preeminent generational researchers in the States. And she basically maps out the path of iGen, which is, I think, people born after 2012, so the younger generation. And I mean, basically they are completely absorbed by their screens, and there are some good things about that. In the sense of, you know, they care a lot about safety and justice, and there's some positive things about iGen. But on the negative, they are absolutely more depressed, more anxious, and more suicide prone. And there's a whole lot of that seems to be direct risk factors. Jean Twain concludes her research by saying that in every situation, non-screen activities increase health and happiness for young people. And in every research situation that she looked at with longitudinal data, screen activities reduce happiness. It's amazing. And so what I think iGen is an indication of where culture's heading, but we're all heading there. So the message is the same. We're experiencing digital overuse, but how we might tackle it might need to look slightly differently. And again, we're all going to be online. We need to be online, and our young people need to be online, but we also really want to train them at an early age to have healthy habits of unplugging, but we need to as well. So when I speak to parents, my first message is a bit surprising. We spend the first half an hour of a 2-hour session me explaining to parents that you need to look at yourself first and model your own habits differently before we look at your children. Because when you're on your phone on the couch and then saying stop being on your phone so much, when they open up the loo one there you are scrolling whatever you're scrolling, like all of that is part of the culture you're setting. So I think the message is the same for all of us, but there are some nuances for younger people. Yeah.
My 2-year-old grandson entertains himself by taking the bike pump, putting it to his ear and talking into it. That's it. Influence of parents. I bought this for his father.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Thank you. Two or three more questions?
Thanks, Daniel. I've read your book and it's fabulous, and I spent part of my professional career running parenting programs, and I can just imagine it's got so much potential for that too. My question, I've also read a lot about neuroplasticity and addictiveness, etc. And obviously this is a whole new area of addictiveness. I already see that in young people. Is this going to be enough to have the pause a day and a day off a week? I have actually seen young people in tantrums because they're not allowed to go on.
I've seen executives in tantrums.
Yes, is this...
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I mean, look, I don't come with all the answers, and I hope in the book I don't come across as if I've got my life together, because I absolutely don't. You know, Richard Bach once said, he's an American author, he wrote that we teach best what we most need to learn. And I think the reason why I know so much about space and unplugging is because I find technology so alluring, and I wrestle with space constantly. So I've got these practices, and they are absolutely life-giving. I don't think I could live the life I have now without those practices. But I fall into, honestly, publishing the book in the last 3 months, I've never had less space. And it feels a bit hypocritical that I'm exhausted and I've lost a lot of the space that I used to have because I'm now speaking constantly about it, you know. And I don't know, I don't think it is enough. My conclusion in the book basically says that we're always going to wrestle with space, and we're always going to wrestle with time, particularly busy professionals and people who care about doing something in the world. And I used to think that was a bad thing. But I've come to the conclusion that my wrestle with space and my struggle with being overwhelmed with technology is actually something that makes me a better person, because it confronts who I am. I have to confront my values. I have to confront my beliefs. I have to confront my worst habits and my best habits. And in the process of wrestling with space, I become the person I'm meant to be. And so, yeah, I don't think it's enough, but I think the wrestle is not a bad thing. The wrestle actually makes us fully human. But we can't get away from the online world. We are, in the words of Elon Musk, we are all cyborgs. And that is the reality. We are digitally mediated people nowadays, and we're not going to be able to get by without it. So how do we do it better? Oh dear. My beautiful wife, what would you like to ask?
I can't say whether or not it's enough for our younger generation who've grown up in it. But what I can say is that the practices, that Daniel lives these practices, and that without having lived them, I'm not sure we'd be married, or I'm not sure that we'd have the 3 incredibly gorgeous children that we have today. And it's not just that we're just holding on either. Like, he's amazing and I love him. I'm very proud of him today. So I just want to say that it's been very good and enough for us thus far.
I'm a bit aware of the... No, we're going to pause. I think we should finish. Yeah. I would thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Kai. Because I want to say some thanks as well in a second. Look, firstly, before I give some thanks to people, I actually would love to ask for a favour. I know this is a hard thing to do, but we do need help to help other people hear this message and help other people find this book. And so there are a few very simple things I'd love you to consider, 3 things particularly, before you head off and mingle and get more drinks and talk about how addicted you are. So the first one is obviously, please buy a book, and thank you so much for everyone who bought a book. I've seen so many people with books, so it's such an honour when people actually spend a chunk of their time reading my words. I really appreciate it. And we have a hard copy version which can only be bought from Fuller's or Today. It's not online, you can't buy it anywhere else. Basically, I like the red cover more, but our tribe said they like blue, so I thought, I'll stuff it, I'll make a red cover and we'll make it the hardcover version. So depending on your cover, grab it. And look, if you've already got a book, feel free to buy more. There is a special just today, so it's one for $30 for paperback, or 2 for $60, or 3 for $90, just today. So feel free to give them out to your friends as Christmas presents. All right. The second thing that would be really helpful is if you could write a review, a customer review on Amazon or Goodreads. Look, I'm not a big fan of Amazon, but basically you need customer reviews on Amazon to sell a book. That's where people go, that's where you build credibility. We have 2 reviews at the moment in Australia, and in Australia it's actually really hard because you need to have spent $50 on Amazon in the last year to be eligible for a review, but anyone can leave a review on Goodreads. But we really need 50 reviews in the next 2 weeks to make this thing go. And there is a go live period where books do really well on Amazon. And so I just really love it if you've read the book. I know it'd be great if you could leave 3 or 4 lines. Don't write too much, but 3 or 4 lines is about perfect. Don't write as if you know me, otherwise I'll just delete the post. They're pretty strict. And yeah, look, it would be amazing. There's a bookmark with every book, and there's some instructions on how to actually write a review. But if I could get 50 reviews in the next 2 to 3 weeks, that would be a total game changer, and it would make a huge difference. So even if you don't use Amazon, but your partner spends big, well then just hack into their account and write it based on them. I don't care, but no, they'll be really helpful, so thank you for that. The last thing that would be really helpful is social media. Now it's ironic that a book about using less social media needs social media. However, we've got some people here. We have Tim, who's way too happy. Chris is trying to read my book and get some logic out of it. And we have Mike, who's got space in a messy shed, which I love. Someone took a photo of their cat. Someone in WA took a photo reading because they thought the colours matched. Look, basically, if you could take a photo of yourself with the book, send it on, whatever it is, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever's your jam. It'd be great, really, really helpful. Or take a selfie with me, I'll be out there, put it on social media. If you can use hashtag Spacemaker, I can track it, and maybe even a link to the book. But if you just put it out there, it's just a way of telling people, that would be super helpful. Okay, and the last thing, I would really like to give thanks to a few people. My editors, because I can't spell. But no, firstly, look, writing a book is not an individual achievement. It's absolutely a communal effort. I didn't realise that until I wrote a book. But it's not just my book, it is actually a book that's been massively contributed by so many people. So firstly, my wife, Kylie, you're absolutely amazing, and I love you very much. And I'm really grateful for the space and the grace that you gave me to write over 7 long years. Kylie doesn't like business books. and she edited every version of my manuscript for 7 years. So that is amazing. So thank you. I'm very grateful. And then she gave me permission to dedicate the book to my business partner, Tim. All right. The second thing, I would like to thank my kids who let me use their stories in the book. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to thank Tim and the amazing team I have at Spacemakers. Look, really, Tim and Mikala and Matt and others have really guided me through. We slogged this out for many, many years. It took way too long, and we made it, so I'm very grateful. So thank you. I'd like to thank 100 Movements, my publisher, particularly Anna Robinson. She's in the UK, and we basically spent all of our time emailing back and forth in the middle of the night, different time zones, and she did an amazing job editing. It was just an incredible experience. They picked up the book for a new author. I'm really grateful for the dozens of people, more than dozens, who contributed in some way by reading the early manuscript, by helping with critical feedback, by providing graphic design, audio book development. There are so many people who are part of this book. It's actually quite amazing. You know who you are, and I can't name you all, but I'm thankful for you. And the last one is to thank you guys here and thank anyone in our tribe who's been supportive of our business over the last few years. Basically, your stories are part of this story, and this book has been inspired by you, and hopefully it will be for you. So thank you so much. Make space and enjoy a drink.